This is the MindShift Podcast, where we share real stories, real strategies that will help you find real success. This is the place to hear from people just like you who have taken their ideas, goals, and dreams from a point of inspiration to realization, or when life knocked them down, from a point of breakdown to breakthrough. I'm your host, Darrell Evans. Let's get started with today's episode. Hey, what's up, everybody? Darrell Evans here with the MindShift Podcast. I can't thank you enough for tuning in on this very first inaugural launch, episode 1 of my brand new show. I can't even believe I'm here. You know, I have been thinking about this show or doing a show, a podcast like this for about a decade. And so there's actually a lesson as we kick off this show in the sense that I procrastinated for about 10 years. But at the same time, I step back and I think to myself, everything has a time and a place under the sun. I'm a big believer in that. So while the information or the idea came to me about 10 years ago, when I was about at my 20-year mark in business, and I'll tell you a little bit more about my backstory in just a moment, it took another 10 years for either the time, the space, the opportunity, or just my decision to decide to move forward. I've been very blessed over the last 35 years in my working life. I became an entrepreneur early when I was in college. At the same time, when I was in college, I was running as a general manager a fast food restaurant called Taco Bell. Shout out to 39-cent tacos if you know what I'm talking about. But seriously, I got an opportunity. I was blessed to have been selected for leadership at the age of 18, and I was entered into the assistant manager program. And this was after starting at Taco Bell, really wanting to put a couple of dollars in my pocket for the weekend. And I signed up, or I should have said I accepted a job as a fry cook. Like I stood over a fryer that was like, 380, 100 degrees or whatever it was in a polyester suit, a polyester uniform. Came home smelling funky every doggone night. But there was something my dad taught me way back when. And he said, you only get one shot to make a good first impression. You only get one shot to make a good first impression. And so him teaching me that at a younger age, and I played sports growing up. And so I was always dedicated to doing my best work. There's another spiritual principle, at least I believe it's a spiritual principle, and that is to prosper where you're planted. And so this kind of mindset or mind shift is how I began to be rooted in almost everything I did, whether it was work, whether it was friendships, whether it was family life, whether it was relationships, whether it was sports. I wanted to put my best foot forward, or at least do the best I could with what I had at the moment. Anyway, fast forward my career. I'm in this workplace right now. I'm doing business. And at age 20, I'm running, I think it was an $800,000 a year restaurant. I soon was promoted later to a $1.2 million or $1.3 million restaurant. I can't keep up with the numbers today, but super blessed at an age of 20, 21, 22 to be managing assistant managers, revenue, top line revenue, hiring, staffing, management, inventory, shipping, ordering, cleanliness, mechanics around the building. You name it. It was a fantastic opportunity. So laugh if you will, because it was Taco Bell. But at the end of the day, they gave me my break into leadership. They trained me, they coached me, they mentored me. And it took 3 long years to actually become a good general manager, at least according to what my boss said at the time. She was the one, of course, who gave me my review. But there was something inside of me during these years that I was in college and I was running this restaurant that just, it was something that I think started around age 15 or 16. And I remember going to the grocery store with my mom. She would go shopping at a store called Lucky's. Today it would be called Albertsons. And there was a little drugstore next to it. Today it would be like Walgreens or CVS. I think it was called Sun Drugs back at the time. And I remember never wanting to stand by her shopping cart as she went around the grocery store. So I would peel off and find myself over by the magazine rack. And at the magazine rack, of all the magazines that were there, I would always find myself looking at the Entrepreneur magazine, the Business Opportunity magazine, the Forbes magazine, and this magazine called the Robb Report. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, but at this time, our family, we were middle class, I guess. I don't really know the classification back then because I didn't know their finances. But, we were just an average family who just did what we did. I mean, my family I was blessed. We never missed a meal. We never didn't have clothes on our back. So as far as I knew, we were middle class. I didn't know what that meant back then, but I do know that, we weren't rich by no imagination. But here I was always being sort of gravitating to this concept of running business, concept of entrepreneurship, starting your own business, making money, business opportunities, that kind of thing. So it would catch up to me around 2000. What am I talking about? It would catch up to me, whatever that year was, 1999 to 19. The heck am I talking about? That would have been 1989 or 1990. Excuse me. Anyway, by the way, we keep this raw and real. I don't script anything. I just kind of talk from the heart, talk off my head. I hope that's okay for you. You'll hear in our interviews that I do with my guests, we are just having conversations. I'm not a Hollywood script writer. I just love having conversations and sharing wisdom and insights. The purpose of this show is to help you close the gap. And wherever you are, it could be a business gap, could be a financial gap, could be a relational gap, it could be a career gap, it could be just a personal development gap. And I don't know everything. I've come a long way in my 35 years in working and in business and in career and as a parent and in fitness and in health and all these other types of aspects, but I am not an expert at everything. So what I have made a conscious effort to do is to surround myself with people who are smarter than me, wiser than me, who traveled different roads than me, who grew up in different circumstances than me, who have achieved different levels of success than me. And together, we're bringing together a collaborative community where we can connect and we can inspire other people to reach their goals and dreams. That's really what we're doing here on this show. Anyway, back to the sort of entrepreneurial story. So I started my first business when I was in college. This entrepreneurial bug, I was running this business and I'm like, okay, I'm looking at a P&L, which means profit and loss statement for those people that don't know. And I'm like, okay, so I'm working this restaurant and I think whatever the numbers were, I can't remember exactly, but we grew the bottom line profit, or should I say the what they call EBITDA in the tax world, which is earnings before taxes and interest, at least on the P&L sheet that I could see. We were growing this little restaurant. And I think that's what led to me being moved up in the company. But I just had a sense that there was something different. I remember finding an opportunity where I could, this sounds so funny today, but I remember finding some opportunity out of one of those magazines where I could buy t-shirts and sports apparel. And something gave me this wise idea to buy this sportswear, hats, t-shirts. By the way, I grew up playing sports. I'm a massive sports fan. Lakers, Dodgers, Rams. We grew up in Las Vegas, so we didn't have sports teams back then. Shout out to all the sports teams coming to Vegas. Shout out to the Raiders, though I'm not a Raiders fan. Shout out to them Golden Knights holding it down on the hockey, NHL. And who knows, probably basketball is coming. Major League Soccer looks like it's knocking on the door as well. But anyway, I found this opportunity and by the way, I needed some extra income, by the way. So I'm running a managerial position, but I'm in college. I've got a son by now and expenses are starting to mount up. And so I'm looking for some additional income opportunities. So long story short, I find this opportunity to wholesale some merchandise and I set up a shop out at the swap meet. If you can imagine that, I set up at an open air swap meet. I had some amount of weekend rent. And of course, I found a way to get weekends off or whatever I did at the time. But I had to set up shop between like 6 a.m. and 12 noon or 1 p.m., something like that. And maybe I worked it out to where I was working evening shifts or whatever that might have been. But I found my way of buying product and then going out and selling this product, right? And then eventually it grew to where I was taking orders. And today we call it e-commerce, but I called it trunk commerce back then because literally I'd back up the trunk of my Honda Civic, my 1988 Honda Civic, with a table, a couple of boxes, a chair, and literally we were in business, right? We were in business back then. So that was my first bug at entrepreneurship. I went on to graduate from the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and finished with a degree in finance. And went on, and at that time, I still wasn't quite sure that I wanted to go start my own business, as I wasn't quite certain. In fact, some people ask me, Darrell, what is one piece of advice you would have given yourself back then in your early 20s? If you went back to being your 21-year-old self, what would you tell yourself today back then? Or what would you tell yourself back then if, knowing what you know today? And I would share this with you as well, because I think everything happens for a reason. But I think if I were sitting with myself at 21, I would have told myself this: believe in yourself sooner. Believe in yourself sooner. So often there's something sitting right in front of us and it's pulling us. It's like written all over the wall. But unfortunately, sometimes in society, sometimes in our family, sometimes in our friend circles, there are people that are trying to pull you in the direction they want you to go, not the direction God wants you to go. And in those moments, you have to find a way to believe a little more in yourself, believe a little sooner in yourself, in your capability, believe that you have the ability to figure it out. That's something that I think is a core foundation of being an entrepreneur, because when you're an entrepreneur, there isn't really a roadmap. I mean, I guess if you buy a franchise, there's a roadmap. If you buy a proven business model, there's a bit of a roadmap. But at the end of the day, you still have to wake up and give yourself a kick in the belief butt. Like, you've got to set up and get up and say, gosh, dog it, I'm going to get it done today. So anyway, I'm in my mid-20s. I go on to a short career right after college, after I get my finance degree. Again, I've had 2 young children by this time. So 2 kids, I think around coming into my 30s, they're in the 9, 10 range and 3 or 4 range, something like that. And I make a pivot. I pivot into what would then become the true jump into entrepreneurship, where at this point, there is no income, there is no safety net, there is no guarantees, there's no salary, there's no guaranteed health insurance, there's no any of that, right? You have to eat what you kill, is what the old phrase was, right? That was the old phrase. When you're an entrepreneur, you're in sales, you get paid for what you produce. You don't get paid just to show up, right? And I think about sports, because my sports career, I think, engineered me. And for those of you who have played any type of organized sports at a decent level, I played all the way through high school. I didn't play through college ball, but then I went on to coach youth basketball and youth football, although my main sports were football and baseball. But there is something about sports and team sports, particularly, that is interestingly aligned with entrepreneurship. And I think if you're listening to this and you've felt this, then you might be in the right place and you might be wanting to tap into that. And what I mean by this is, in sports, there's no guarantee, no matter how talented you are. Anyone can beat anybody on any given day, no matter how talented you are, no matter how game planned you are, no matter how scripted you are, no matter how well you've prepared for the other team. Well, in entrepreneurship, it's very much the same way. You can put together a plan, go to execute that plan, and there are all sorts of variables, all sorts of unknowns. And in many cases, entrepreneurs and us as humans, we can't handle those variances, those variables. We like certainty, right? We love to know exactly what is going to happen next. And so this idea of entrepreneurship, and I went to this new pivot, I was very confident by this time. And there was a set of circumstances that led me to this level of confidence. We'll examine many of these MindShift principles and many of these sort of success principles as I would outline them. We'll examine these as episodes go on, not only through my talks with my guests, but also through some mini episodes that I'll be taking you through with me alone, where I'll be your coach, I'll be your guide, I'll be your mentor. It isn't because I know everything. It isn't because I've got an answer for every situation. But over the last 35 years, I'd have to be absolutely an idiot not to be able to take some of the successes and failures and actions and situations and things that I've had to navigate as an entrepreneur, as a businessman, as a leader, as a father, as a friend, as a brother, and all of those other types of things. I'd have to be just an idiot to not have figured out a set of core principles that sort of guide this idea of closing the gap between where you are and where you want to be, and or when life knocks you down, how to get yourself back up and pivot so that you can break through to that next level in your life and or success. So into my 30s, I enter the mortgage industry. In the mortgage industry, I become a top loan officer, as they call it. Essentially, you're a salesperson with no paycheck. You have to build a business. I don't care what the title is. You don't eat unless you close a home loan. In other words, unless you're successful getting someone a home loan closed and getting them the keys to their house, you don't get paid. Like you do all the work up front, sort of like being a contingency lawyer who, unless you win the case, you don't get paid. So that was the life I began. And that's really the life of an entrepreneur. Unless you produce a product or service that provides value to a marketplace, you just don't get paid. And to the point that you don't do that continuously and you're not continually making your product or service better, making your product or service more experiential and building a raving fan base, then you won't be in business very long. And we're looking around. If you look around the business community, there's tons and tons of disruption going on. One in particular that comes to mind, just yesterday, we hear about Charming Charlie's, which is a retail establishment, is just yet one another company in this retail apocalypse sort of going on right now with brick and mortar retails and malls that are just getting killed by the e-commerce transition. So we're going to talk more about business. We're going to talk more about finances and education and success principles and weight loss and fitness and everything dealing with how to be successful in life, how to get from where you are to where you want to be. The goal of this podcast is to close gaps. So here I am in my early 30s and I become a top level loan officer and I end up with an opportunity to partner and open up a mortgage company with my partners at that time. We opened up a company. We end up growing to, 106, I think, something like that, loan officers, salespeople, basically under our corporate umbrella. And we had success for a few years. And of course, we could fast forward to 2008. For those of you who were around, you know what happened. I'm not going to beat it up, but we had this thing called a recession caused by the real estate and mortgage industry collapsed, or should I say, those were two of the catalysts. Fast forward through, one of the core principles, or core, should I say, things that I did well. I mean, something that just helped me grow businesses from, whether it was my commerce business where I was selling things at the swap meet to a couple of other ventures. A good buddy of mine, John, and I, we started a company called Looking Up Incorporated. Imagine that. If you could only imagine looking up at nasty, dirty ceiling tiles. We started a little janitorial service somewhere in our mid-20s. That went well for a minute until we realized we got hustled by the supplier. I'm laughing now, but it wasn't funny back then because we lost a bunch of money. It turned out that the chemical composition to water mix that we were supposed to be using to clean these ceiling tiles, we had been sold it at one level and it was like 5 times that level. So our costs were like 5 times what we thought it was going to be. That's what you get for being a young entrepreneur and not too smart about due diligence. But anyway, those are the life experiences. How do you bounce back for those kind of things? Anyway, into my 30s, we opened this mortgage company. 2008 happens. And I'm at a point, 2009, where I'm trying to think, what do I do now? I'm actually bankrupt. Unfortunately, went through a divorce. And, I've got children who live across state lines and just, truthfully enter into a place where you're like, how the heck did I get here? Have you ever had a situation where you woke up and you're like, dang, what the heck happened? How did I get here? After a season of fruitfulness and a season of abundance or a season of things really going your way. And then you wake up one day and you're like, what the heck happened? I mean, do you know what I'm talking about, podcast family? I mean, have you ever had a scenario, maybe not in business, but have you ever woken up and said, wow, I don't believe I'm in this mess? And so the question, and part of the core ideas in this idea of mind shift is when we encounter those times in our life, what do we do? Like, what has to happen in order for us to pivot and get ourselves out of that mess? One of my guests coming up is going to be a lady who literally during that window of time was one of the people who impacted me the most in something that she said that rocked me to my core. And I would say was one of the few comments during that little season, during that little 6, 8, 10-month window where I was, you could have probably called me depressed even. I don't know if there was one statement, and there probably were a few others, but this one was critical. And she said something, her and I battled about what that exact statement was. She'll be coming up on one of the episodes here. And she said to me, Darrell, just because you fell down from that mountaintop doesn't mean that was the highest peak God had for you. And I mean to tell you, when she said that, it just rocked me from head to toe. And it was like one of those things was like, snap out of it, homeboy, snap out of it. I've given you your opportunities. I've given you wisdom. I've given you pathways. I've given you places for you to grow. And those are the kinds of things, and those are the kind of people that I'm going to bring to you on this show. What's going to happen on this show is I'm going to be interviewing and talking to and conversating with people, friends, leaders, entrepreneurs, people that I've just been blessed to work with and know and call friends and call colleagues over the last 20, 30 years, who are ordinary people just like you, but who are doing and have done extraordinary things. And despite what they've done, it doesn't mean they haven't had challenges. It doesn't mean they haven't hit brick walls and pitfalls and been knocked off mountains and haven't had doors slammed in their face and haven't had to face adversity. And it's in those moments of adversity, you have an opportunity to make new decisions. And what we talk about here in MindShift is not just mindset. I'm a big time believer in mindset, but I believe mindset is very intentional, meaning when you change your mindset, you intend on doing something. You intend on things being different moving forward. But when you mind shift, and I'll share with you in episode 7, in mind shift, you have to now behave in a different way. You show up differently. One of my mentors is Tony Robbins. For years and years, I think Tony Robbins was the first personal development person, speaker, coach that I encountered probably when I was 19. His first book that I believe I read was Unlimited Power. Went on to read Awaken the Giant Within. If you know who he is, you either love him or you hate him, but I can tell you he has impacted millions and millions and millions of people around the world. And it was something that has stuck with me every single moment since I read that first book. And he says that it's in the moment of your decisions that your destiny is shaped. And that comment, that quote resonates with me so much. And anytime I get into a situation or circumstance, whether it's positive or negative, whether it's a success situation or a situation I need to bounce back from, I'm always thinking the next decision is going to help shape my destiny. What do I want it to be? 2008, 2009, I'm in a pivot. I have an epiphany. My body is chilled from top to bottom. My friend goes on to her conference. We just had a moment in time for a few moments to conversate. She hit me with that. That was another indication that God dropped her right in my space at the right time, because I believe when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And this doesn't have to mean a teacher in a school or a college or a university or a lecture class or a seminar. It could be your friend, your colleague, the person sitting next to you in the cubicle. It could be your boss. It could be your friend. It could be someone who helps you out with your groceries at the grocery store. In this case, it was a friend of mine who was passing through town who dropped that lesson on me. And I was ready to hear it because there were things going on and I needed to change. Another thing happened that year that was also another pivotal comment or quote that came to me, and it resonated in such a way. And I want to bless you with it right now. And I hope you will think about this dearly. So at this moment, I had had some goals. Like here I am at 38, 39. I'd had some plans made around 2004. I would have been 34, 35. I was working with a great business coach. I'm hoping to have him on the show at some point in the future. But he worked me through some exercises to get me to think about my life 25 years from that moment. So here we are working together around 34, 35. I'm 34, 35 at that time. And he's working me through what my life's going to look like 25 years from then. And I'm like, wow. And I'm telling you, it was profound work. If you've never done that kind of work, then hopefully I'll be able to expose you to that kind of thought process through some of the people that I've worked with over the years. Because let me be clear. Let me be 100% clear. No one gets to where they may call their place of success alone. A critical piece to evolving, to succeeding, to accomplishing is having great mentors, great teachers, great support networks on the journey, because technically the success lies in the journey and not the destination. And in order to do that well, you have to be around great people. You have to be getting input from people who've walked a path that you wanted to walk. There's no sense in reinventing the wheel. That's what I hope to have some of our guests share with you on this show. In 2009, October, I'm reading a book, and in the book, there's a man by the name of Jim Rohn who says, it's not the blowing of the wind that determines your destination. It's the set of the sail. So if you find yourself not where you want to be, don't abandon the goal. Change your plan. Set a new sail. And in October 2009, it would change everything for me. I do an exercise back then that literally started on a sheet of paper. I literally wrote it down, split the paper in half, and in episode 7, I will walk you through that very episode. I don't know where you are right now. I have no idea what's going on in your life. I have no idea if you're trying to make a change, do something. But this is an exercise that I literally share with everyone who is faced with making a new decision about where they're going to go next. It doesn't matter what the next is. It's about what to do next. And it's how to isolate, because sometimes when we're in moments of pain, when we're in moments of adversity, when we're not feeling our best, when we're not believing in ourselves the most, when our self-esteem has been rocked for some reason, we tend to be very quick. And there's psychology to back this up. And we'll talk about this in future episodes. There's psychology to back this up, that we are many more times likely to pick up our negative attributes than our positive attributes. And that is why so many of us get stuck. We get stuck in the wiring of what we can't do versus what we can do. And you're going to hear about this idea of not focusing on our inabilities and focusing on our abilities in episode 2. I can't wait for you to hear that. So in October 2009, I start this exercise. I finish this exercise and I've got this new vigor. I've got this new idea. I've got this new, how do I go back to the 2004 or 2005 conversation with my then business coach and mentor? And how do I realign with what I drew out? Like some people just abandon their goals and dreams. I went back and said, okay, this is what I was committed to this being my life in 20 years. And now things have been disrupted, especially in the industry I worked in my finances, they have been disrupted. Everything had been disrupted. But then how do I get back aligned? So anyway, I made new decisions. Today, I am the co-founder of a digital marketing agency. So I tapped into that exercise. That exercise helped me outline several, and I mean 7 to 10 master disciplines that I had developed over, at that time, my 15 to 16 year or so business career. And it helped me map out how I could take those skills, because what I lost economically, what I lost in real estate, what I lost in sort of the company that I quote unquote had helped build at that time was what we call temporal, right? What I hadn't lost was the experiences. What I hadn't lost was the lessons. What I hadn't lost was the education. What I hadn't lost were my skills. See, those were never going to go away. So I just needed to figure out how to take everything that I still retained and repurpose that into a new place, right? What was this new place that would be the next level of my journey? And that's what led me to the digital marketing space, having a long-term background in entrepreneurship, marketing, and sales. And again, in future episodes, we'll get into, just so you know, I don't typically like to brag about things, but I will tell you some things because I think it's important that you know who you're listening to and feel confident that I'm just not randomly coming up with stuff, right? I'm not a theorist. I'm very much a guy who does the work. In fact, had a small opportunity to co-author, or should I say include a chapter in a book by James Malinchak. And for those of you, if you reach out to me, I'll make sure you can get a copy. I think I maybe got 100 copies of that left. But in the book, I talk about doing the reps. So one thing I want you to know is you're listening to somebody who does the work. I show up every day. I do the reps, right? I don't just talk in theory. Like, I'm not a teacher. I mean, technically, you might think that I'm a teacher, but I'm not a teacher. I'm someone who wants to impart ideas and thoughts that have actually manifested through the work, the grind, the lessons, the blood, the sweat, the tears, if you will. And I learned how to do the reps in sports, right? When I wanted to accomplish a certain goal in sports, I had to go to work. I had to punch the clock, as we say. I had to get in the gym. I had to learn plays. I had to learn skills. I had to learn my feet, move my feet a certain way. I had to be able to read passes when I played defense as a linebacker. And I transitioned that into business. And so in business, it's about doing reps. And to me, you'll hear more and more about this as we talk about repetitions and doing the reps. But it's a core philosophy. I think a lot of people talk about what they want to do, and then they just don't do anything. They don't do the work. They don't even take the first step. And the funny thing about accomplishing anything is about doing the small things. I mean, heck, launching this podcast was a lot of work. Sure, you could say it's easy, just turn on a microphone and start popping off, or it's easy to just call up your friends and jump on a Zoom broadcast and just record something and throw it out there. But there's a lot to this, right? This is a creative project. I'm not the most creative person on the planet. I've got some people around me I've reached out to for some help. And thankfully, we're getting this show launched, and I'm super, super excited. So here we are. We're in our 9th year as a digital marketing agency. Our goal, our job as a company, as an agency, we've been building this company. We're blessed now to have helped small to mid-sized businesses grow by, well in excess of $200 million in revenues. We've had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of success stories, everything circled around the digital marketing space, meaning everything from getting brand awareness online and in social media to getting cold eyeballs who've never seen a company's brand to get them to purchase, whether they're using Google or Instagram or Facebook or search engine optimization. I mean, you've probably seen or heard of some of that stuff. Either you're a customer who purchases that way today, or you're a business who wants to grow your business that way today. So that's what we do at our company, YokoLocal. And if you want to happen to learn more about that, you can go over to yokolocal.com. You can find us there. You can also find out more about me specifically and some consulting and things that I do outside of our agency. And you can, of course, connect with me at darrellevans.net. And any and everything that I've talked about up to this point, I'll go ahead and link up in the show notes, which you can find out over at the MindShiftPodcast.com. So I've been here long enough rambling about my background and my story. And if you're still here, man, I just want to thank you for taking time to let me share a little bit about my story. Let me wrap up by telling you a little bit about this show. We're going to release a new episode every Tuesday from here going forward, as long as this show is running. Now, every other Friday or so, I'm going to release a personal episode, which it's a solo episode where I'll be teaching you some of the success principles, some of the behavioral principles, some of what I call the MindShift principles that I believe are critical to closing the gap from where you are to where you want to be, or helping you go from a point of breakdown to breakthrough. I often say there's 2 paradigms that we work with here in the MindShift podcast arena. And that is a point of inspiration to realization. When you've got a goal, a dream, an idea, how do you close the gap and make that a success? Or when life knocks you down, go from a point of breakdown to breakthrough. Like I mentioned to you about 10 years ago, I was in a point where life critically broke down. And that wasn't the only time. There'll be plenty of stories. I'm very transparent. Something that is just not talked about enough is what's really going on behind the scenes, behind the social media photos, behind the audio podcasts, behind the videos, what's really going on. So I believe in transparency, and I hope you're okay with that. I hope you're okay with that, because I think it's what we need to do today to be real. None of us are here without struggle. None of us here have all the answers. And the goal of this podcast is to build a community of people who are here to cheer each other on, support each other in their own individual journey. We're not here to tell you what to do. We're not here to tell you to change anything you're doing. We're here to give you an idea. There may be one insight that comes from a conversation that we have on this show. There may be one principle that I talk about on episode 150. Who knows when that will be. And it could be just like that moment in my experience about 10 years ago, where my friend, she made one statement and it snapped me out of something. It snapped me out of a mindset that I was stuck in for a small window of time. Okay. That's what we're doing here on the MindShift podcast. So every Tuesday, you want to check us out. If you're not subscribed already, you need to subscribe wherever you listen. Spotify, Google, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, wherever it is you listen, you're going to be able to get the show. And then be sure to look for those special episodes on Friday. And so again, the cadence will be 4 episodes a month, 4 conversations and interviews per month. And then I'll sprinkle in a couple of teaching modules as we go along. In the long term, I want to help make sure that you get these critical key insights that I've been able to develop. I also want to encourage you to go over to the MindShiftPodcast.com. I'd like you to join our email list. And the reason for that is I'll have some special training, some special emails that go out, but just to continue to give you some inspiration and share with you some insights, just something that'll just keep us in touch. And in order to stay connected after this show ends, after you listen to an episode, I really want you to come be a part of our global Facebook community. That is going to be a free Facebook group community that you can find at the mindshiftpodcast.com/Facebook. That'll redirect you over to Facebook. If you're already on Facebook, all you got to do is look for the MindShift Podcast community. You should see our logo. You should see a nice banner that welcomes you into the community. This is a global community where we all can get together digitally and share insights. Like if you hear something that one of our guests say, if you hear something that I'm sharing with you that just blows your mind, share it with us. What did you get out of it? What are you doing differently? How are you impacted by these episodes? This is being done to help lift other people to the next level. One of my core mission statements, and it took years and years and years for it to really come out of me, but it really came down to just a few words. And it's something that I believe in every single thing that I do. And if I ever don't do this in some kind of way, I ask my friends, people around me to hold me accountable. And that is that my job, my goal, my purpose, I believe, is to positively impact people. It's really simple, to positively impact people. If we cross paths in any way, digital or physical, I want to make sure that our interaction in some way improved your life, not took away from your life. I'm not perfect. I get upset. I say things sometimes that I don't mean to say. I may say something in a way that doesn't come across the way you'd like to hear it. I don't mean it in a negative way. I simply love to inspire people, and I do it in my own kind of way. I'm sure you follow other people who have their own style, and I hope my style is something that works with you. But my goal and my purpose is to positively impact people. So inside this Facebook group, I'm going to be doing my best to encourage some of my guests who are just doing great things to come in and do some Facebook Live discussions. They could be Q&As. They could be doing short teaching modules, but it's a way, because in 30 to 45 minutes on a show, we can't get all of their insights out of their head. And in many cases, in order to get their deeper insights, you're going to have to pay to go to their show, their program, their course, their seminar, whatever it may be. And so what I'm doing is making sure I convince them to come in and give you some more value for free. Take the conversation a little deeper. Get a little bit more insight from these people who are making a difference in the world. So again, I would love for you to come over. It's 100% free. Just go to the mindshiftpodcast.com/Facebook. It'll redirect you over to our Facebook community. And if you're already on Facebook, of course, just look up the MindShift Podcast community. Can't wait to see you inside. All right, everybody. I want to wrap this conversation up on episode number 1 of the MindShift Podcast. Listen, again, if you haven't subscribed, be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. If you think this show is going to help someone you know, just having listened to what you heard today, if you think someone else could listen and benefit from what's coming down the pipe, and I'm telling you right now, I have a lineup of just great people. I mean, hundreds and hundreds of people that are doing fantastic things. They're ordinary people, but they're doing extraordinary things. And I've got them committed to sharing some of their best insights on this show. To kick things off, in episode 2, you are going to absolutely be blown away by my friend, Reggie Bennett. Go ahead and take a listen to that right now. Hey, my friend, thanks again for listening today to today's episode of the MindShift Podcast. Listen, let's not have the conversation end here. Connect with me on social at Mr. Darrell Evans on almost all the platforms, with the exception of Facebook. My Facebook fan page is at Darrell Evans Fan. Until next week, remember, you're just one shift away from the breakthrough you're looking for.